Good morning. I'm George Beard. I'm Head of New Mobility at TRL. I'm very pleased to contribute to this conference, so thank you for having me. The focus of my talk today is on micromobility safety. Now, the SAFE system provides a good framework for the discussion, as it really helps to set out some of the key levers we can pull to achieve better safety outcomes. So I'm going to focus on two areas. First, a discussion about collision data, and second, a discussion about safe vehicles. For collisions, then, micromobility is a broad sector, and data is particularly limited for some vehicle types. So I'm focusing here on e-scooters as a case study. Now, the most recent official source is the DFT's 2021 e-scooter fact sheet. This shows us that there were about 1,300 or so collisions reported to the police in 2021 involving e-scooters, and the majority of those involved another party. For cycles as a comparison, there are about 17,000 collisions, again with the majority involving another party, but with a smaller proportion of single vehicle incidents compared to e-scooters. We can also see that the greatest risks of injury are present for the e-scooter riders themselves, with the next most at risk being pedestrians. I'm not showing the data on the slide, but there's a similar trend for pedal cyclists. However, proportionally speaking, there are fewer pedestrians injured in collisions involving pedal cycles compared with e-scooters. Now, of course, the raw numbers ignore the fact that the two modes are used in different ways to different extents, so a casualty rate provides a better means of comparing between modes. And estimates from DFT suggest a casualty rate of 13 e-scooter casualties per million miles, compared with a rate of 3.9 for cyclists. However, the e-scooter rate is related to rental e-scooters only, we should caveat, and also the data which went into that estimate were only from 6 of the 32 trial areas, because those 6 areas had a sufficient distinction between private and rental e-scooter collisions. So what do we know from this? Does it suggest that e-scooters are less safe than cycles? Well, maybe, but maybe not. There are a number of important factors at play here. One key limitation is the novelty factor. E-scooters are relatively new, of course. Cycles are not. Cycles have been embedded in our transport system for many decades, many learning to ride from a young age. And as such, we need to be careful when interpreting the data, since it's not a like-for-like comparison in terms of that user experience. And indeed, self-reported incident data from user surveys in DFT's evaluation shows that the inexperienced riders were much more likely to report having a collision than the experienced. There's also a major challenge at the source of data collection. So the Stats 19 form shown here currently has a pedal cycle category, but not an e-scooter category. And so recording of e-scooter collisions is reliant on the free text boxed within the other vehicle category. And that ultimately introduces room for user error, variability in approach, lack of consistent information, and so on. And indeed, that's exactly the reason that the e-scooter casualty rate I discussed earlier was only based on data from 6 trial areas. There's been a consultation on the form, however, and it's been agreed that a new vehicle category will be added, the powered personal transporter device, or PPT. However, the changes are not in place yet, and they're due to roll out from 2024. Will take some time to embed the change across all police forces and regions. I think we should also consider whether PPT category is going to solve all our problems. So thinking beyond e-scooters to the broader micromobility sector, there's a great deal of complexity, and it's likely to only get more complex. We have various different forms of e-bike and cargo bike. Should these will be categorized as pedal cycle in future, or are some more like PPTs? We have e-scooters, of course, which are themselves not homogeneous in design, seated and standing variants. In theory, these will be captioned as PPTs in future, but will that approach be consistent in terms of gathering the other important factors like whether they're shared or private, which we know isn't happening at the moment? And we've also got a large range of other powered devices in various stages of technological development. Should these be captured as PPTs, or are they other vehicles, and where to draw the line between them? And as more forms of micromobility are adopted into the mainstream, it's important we have a system for monitoring safety, and our current system is probably not up to the job. There are some alternatives, of course, beyond the Stats 19 collision data. There's other sources of information which can help us understand safety. This includes hospital data like HES and TARN. This includes more detailed information on clinical outcomes, but is limited to traffic collisions where a hospital admission is required. I mentioned operator data before. This is typically user reported. We've got media and social media reports, very patchy, should be treated with caution, but can sometimes add some useful information. And then lastly, we've got incident detection technologies. These typically offer an AI or machine learning approach for detecting incidents, usually with software at the back end and an integrated hardware solution on the bike or scooter. And so to make best use of these sources, there are some clear benefits to be able to integrate them together or to fill gaps in the individual sources. So for example, there's some good work going on at TFT to explore linking between TARN and Stats 19, and there's some specific focus there on matching data between e-scooter casualties. And at TRL, we've partnered with a company called Flare, who specialise in automatic detection of incidents and hazards for cyclists and e-scooters. And our goal here really is to open up opportunities to integrate Flare's data with other sources of collision information using our IMAP road safety management platform. This can enable more detailed analysis of safety in a region to give a more complete picture of safety. So far then, we've been on a whistle-stop tour of some headline collision statistics, highlighted some limitations in that, and explored some options for filling the gaps. But irrespective of those limitations, we do know that collisions are happening, and they will likely increase to some extent as adoption of micromobility increases. So therefore, going back to the safe system, it's crucial we address the factors which contribute to safety, and safe vehicles is one key part of that. So in that context, first, we need to recognise the diverse nature of micromobility. This is a summary from a market review we did for the European Commission, now a few years old, but even then still highlights the breadth of devices available for purchase and the varied form factors on offer. And so from a safety perspective, we cannot assume all micromobility is equal. Certain technologies become more mainstream. We need to make sure we have a clear understanding of their safety performance. At TRL, we've been doing some performance testing to try and help with this for the last couple of years. It's originally based on methodology developed for the DFT. And broadly, we focus on three things. We look at braking, we look at stability, and we look at an independent validation of geofencing technologies. And pulling together some of this testing data, we can see that performance does indeed vary across different models of e-scooter. So for example, here, there's a sample of data showing mean stopping distances for some of the scooters we've tested, speeds between 5 and 25 kilometers an hour. Now, in some cases, we see differences as large as 5 meters. We also know that braking performance varies with design and how the brakes are operated by the rider. So, for example, we've seen considerably longer stopping distances for a model with a foot brake and electronic brake, particularly when those brakes are used independently. And for some models, we've seen a tendency for pitching up onto the front wheel if the front brakes are applied too firmly. And that requires conscious intervention by the rider to manage, and so clearly could catch some novice riders off guard. We've also tested the impact of potholes on stability. Again, found some variability here in terms of lateral deviation, which results from traversing these potholes. Although magnitude of the differences is small in some cases, vehicle design can again make a difference though. So one notable example was a particular model with small wheels and solid tyres, which became destabilised when riding through the pothole. Our collision investigation team has also conducted some in-depth study on a sample of second-hand private e-scooters, and just this small sample again shows the variability in specifications out there. And as part of this work, we found some common safety issues with regards to maintenance. So more than 50% of the sample needed adjustment of brakes or steering, such as realigning handlebars, tightening screws, before they could be deemed safe for testing. We found the mud guards were broken or missing completely from 10 of the 25 devices, and those same devices also had the rear lights on the mud guards, and so that causes an issue for missing lighting. Tyre maintenance was also a frequent problem. Many of the devices being far from the recommended inflated tyre pressures, and also some challenges with regards to accessing valves using standard manual or airline inflation systems, which could present a barrier to proper maintenance. Then there's also variability in the layout of vehicle controls. So, for example, some brake levers on the left and others on the right. What do we do about all this variability in design and performance, and how do we work towards this system with safer vehicles? Well, first step, as everyone knows, is to create an appropriate set of technical standards for micromobility. E-scooter is probably the priority here, but really we need this for the micromobility sector as a whole. And that's not straightforward, of course. Ultimately, it's going to require some balance between creating a system which is overly prescriptive versus open, strict, flexible, burdensome versus proportionate, and specification versus outcome focused. And these future regulations will set the minimum standards for micromobility, but really we should be thinking beyond that. There are a huge array of safety factors which will likely fall outside of the scope of those standards, or which can be improved upon. So how do we drive that continuous improvement across the sector beyond the minimum standards, and ultimately to get us to better safety outcomes? Well, this is a question TRL have been pondering, and to help us with the challenge, we've partnered with the Commission for Micromobility in Sport, and together we've developed a concept called the Micromobility Assessment Partnership, or MMAP for short. The idea behind MMAP is fundamentally a comprehensive star rating system that's validated on evidence and which provides a transparent and independent evaluation of micromobility products and services. It's outcome focused, designed to layer on top of regulations as a voluntary scheme focused on driving innovation and continuous improvement. And its scope goes beyond safety, with application to other key outcomes we're striving for in sustainability and social responsibility, for example. Now we're at the start of the journey with MMAP, and very much welcome discussion and feedback from all parts of the sector to help shape it. So please do get in touch if interest. To wrap up then, what have we learned? Well, we still don't have a complete understanding of e-scooter safety, and even more gaps when it comes to the broader micromobility sector. Key challenge with that is some fundamental limitations with Stats 19. So we really need a robust system, but recognise that that's not an easy fix. Integration of multiple data sets together can help, and that can bring a more complete picture. Safe vehicles, one part of the safe system, arguably a key priority right now. And that's because the current situation is suboptimal with a hugely varied set of vehicles and different design and performance characteristics. As a starting point to address that, we need a clear set of technical standards. This is probably most pressing for e-scooters again, but is needed for other form factors too if we want the sector to thrive. But we shouldn't stop there. The future regulations will set the minimum standards, and then we can put in place mechanisms for driving continuous improvement in safety, as well as other areas such as sustainability and social responsibility. So thank you very much for listening. I look forward to questions and discussions later.